Well, it's time to talk about one of the team that I like, which is Minnesota. So, last year the Loons certainly gave me an amazing ride, but in some way it definitely did not end it as the way that I was hoping they could do, which I'll get to that. But last season they finished with a record of 15, 8, and 11, which is by far their best in franchise history. They finished with 53 points, which was also by far their best and highest in their franchise history. They scored 52 goals, conceded 43 goals last season, and I remember this team usually concede like 70 plus goals in their first two seasons, and that I think last season of them conceding only 43 goals just to shows you how much they improved in defense, and that if there is one team that have improved their defense dramatically, it has to be Minnesota, which I don't think there's a lot of surprise because last season they really break the bank in terms of getting some defensive reinforcement. They of course got some reinforcement like Iko Para and Ozzy Alonso, and they really help dearly with this team. And also they have a goal differential of +9. Now, last season summary, as I said, they had a historic season by finishing fourth in the Western Conference of not only making the playoffs for their first time in franchise history, but also playing their first ever home playoff game in franchise history. But unfortunately, this is where I get to the thought that, as much as it was an amazing ride that they gave me, it definitely did not end well as they got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by none other than the LA Galaxy. And they also lost in the U.S. Open Cup. I forgot to put final right here, which was pretty disappointing because I thought they were going to potentially win their first trophy in their franchise history, and they couldn't quite do that. And I will still have horrors after what happened in that U.S. Open Cup final game, where you guys remember, I believe, was Michael Boxall. He basically hit the ball wide of the area in the last minute, and that if he would have put that ball into the back of the net, that game would have been tied up at 2 apiece, and we would have gone to extra time. But because he headed wide, the Minnesota didn't get the equalizer, and Atlanta eventually went on and hold on to win the U.S. Open Cup that year. In terms of players that they added this offseason, so last offseason they added a ton of defensive help. This season they added a little bit of attacking force, which it makes sense because I think heading into this season, Minnesota, not only they're in a pretty good shape, but their problem this season is kind of like the opposite as they had for the last couple of seasons, where defense was always a problem for the Loons. This season, it was the attack that is kind of a little bit short, and they need to have some attacking piece, and they have got some good attacking piece. First of all, getting Luis Amiela, who I think he's going to be the main goal scorer of this team. Just kind of said that before I even got into the goal scoring part. They added a couple more depth in Marlon Harrison and Greg Regensin. I think that's how you pronounce. Actually, he's not really a depth piece. He's more kind of like a backup goalkeeper for this team. Speaking of goalkeeper, we also got Tyler Miller. So it's unfortunate that Vita Monone, who, I also have to mention that he was also a vital part in terms of why this team only conceded 43 goals, because not only he was the goalkeeper of the year last season, but he was probably the reason why that we didn't concede a lot of goal. And even if there are times where defense kind of stutter a little bit, he made some big save throughout last season to make sure that we are able to not concede that many goals and get some crucial points throughout the year. I mean, my favorite moment from Vita Monone in terms of making a crucial save was that game against FC Dallas, where I believe Dallas had a penalty to potentially, I think they either had a penalty potentially tie it or actually win the game, and Vita Monone basically stopped that, and we basically, I believe we either won that 1-0, or tied the game up at 1 apiece against Dallas. So yeah, it's sad the fact that he's no longer with this team, but this offseason he did say that he wants to have a DP contract, and that one of the cardinal sin that every team do not want to make is get a designated player contract to a goalkeeper, and I'm so happy the fact that Minnesota did not fall into that trap of a cardinal sins, and that, anytime when you're a goalkeeper and you ask a DP contract to your team, that is pretty much a death sentence and saying that, yeah, you're gonna be out of this club unless you decided to ask for a less amount of contract besides a designated player contract. They also got James Musa, another player to add in terms of the midfield depth. Same goes with Ja'Cory Hayes. Raheem Edwards, some more depth in terms of the wing area. Aaron Schoenfeld, a little bit more added depth in terms of the striker position. And Jose Aja, some depth in terms of the defensive depth. Now, in terms of player that is out of this team, there is definitely a lot of players that actually left this team. So much that I almost ran out of boards in terms of listing all the players that is out of Minnesota this offseason. So we start off with Carter Manley, Colin Martins, Rasmus Schuler, Wilfred Monby, Ali Henes Nignenta, I think that's how you pronounce, Darwin Quintero, Abu Danladi, Miguel Ibarra, Lawrence Olam, Vito Manone, Angelino Rodriguez, Wyatt Umsberg, Romero Ibarra, and Dion St. Clair. So, I know that when you look at all these names and, knowing the fact that they had so many players that is no longer with this team, many people think that they should be worried about the fact that there's so many roster turnover. But having said that, they did a good job in terms of not only getting rid of some of the pieces that they feel like might not really kind of help them heading into the future by replacing a couple of them doing this offseason. And I really believe some of the depth pieces that we got this offseason will help to relieve some of the guys that we lost this offseason, and that, this is a good example of a team that, despite the fact that they had a lot of huge high turnover and that they did lose a lot of guys in terms of the depth chart, at least they did a good job in terms of finding some players in the market to replace some of those depth players that they lost this offseason. Now, going to the goal scored, as I mentioned before, it's Luis Amiola that is going to be the main goal scored. I mean, he even said that he is going to try to score 25 goals this season, which I will definitely put the under in terms of him scoring 25 goals. I mean, I love the optimism that he brings, and this is something that you love to see a striker that not only demand to score goals, but also set a target, the fact that he can score that many goals a season. But let's be honest, to be realistic, I think he probably won't score 25 goals this season. I mean, if he does, that will be just amazing, but I'll say he probably can score like 10 to 15, or at max I would say maybe 20 goals this season. And so far in this preseason, he has already shown some promise that he can definitely be the goal scorer. He scored twice in that game against New England in the last preseason game. So, yeah, at least I guess maybe in some way with him scoring goals pretty much almost every single game in the preseason can show a sign that maybe he's going to do the same thing in the regular season, and that maybe he can get close to 25 goals. But as I said many times before, just because you score goals regularly in the preseason doesn't mean it always transition and say that you can score goals every single game in the regular season. And hence, this is also the reason why I don't pay close attention to preseason, except for the teams that I support and that I do pay a little bit more close attention than if it does come when the regular season starts. Playmaker, I put a question mark in terms of this because, if there's one player that I think we haven't really replaced, and there's one spot that we're kind of a little bit short, is going to be that number 10 role where Darwin Quintero was playing in that role for majority of the last couple of seasons. Now that he's gone, we still haven't really found a replacement, although we are heavily linked with this Emmanuel Reynoso guy from Boca Junior, and the news has been kind of gone in a little bit of a roller coaster where there's some news that's saying that it's not going to happen and that he's going to stay with Boca Junior, and that Boca, of course, rejected the original bid, which, by the way, that actually is true. Boca Junior did reject the original bid that Minnesota wants to pay $5 million and Boca basically says no and wants them to pay $7 million for 70% of the right for Emmanuel Reynoso. And then recently I heard the news are saying that this deal is getting very close and it's just going to be a matter of time before this deal went through. So yeah, we shall see whether or not if that does go through, and if it does go through, then that is certainly the missing link in the puzzle, and that, he could definitely be a good replacement for Darwin Quintero. Now, in terms of MVP on this team, I'm gonna say Iko Para, and so far this season preview that I've done, I think this is only the second time I name a defender as an MVP. And you're going to be surprised that the next season preview that I'm going to do, which is Nashville, is also going to be a defender as an MVP. But the reason why I give it to Iko Para in this is because, he was really the rock on this team and that he arguably was the best defender on this team. I mean, no disrespect to Michael Boxhall, but Iko Para was really the best defender of this team and that he really kind of shown his quality that he had when he was with Sporting KC and now bought it to Minnesota, and I have a feeling he's going to do the same thing. Now, I will also say this, he is getting a little bit older, and that I think he will be 31 or 32 heading into this season, so let's just hope that he doesn't slow down a little bit, and that goes the same with Ozzie Alonso, where, Ozzie, he is going to be a year older, and that he's also getting up to that age, so yeah, hopefully their quality wouldn't drop too much heading into this upcoming season. But it's also a word to thought that, Minnesota, as much as they have a very good defensive structure in their team, there are a couple of their star defender that is kind of aging a little bit, and that eventually we're going to have to replace Ozzie Alonso, and the same can go with Iko Para. Now, in terms of surprise package, I'm going to go with the 2 draft pick that Minnesota got from last season and ends up to be a very decent draft pick. And that, of course, is Chase Gaspard and Hassani Dotson. So, as much as I know, I've been saying that I don't pay attention to the Super Draft because most of the time, the players that is picked from the draft doesn't really accelerate in their career to be a decent player in their first season. Well, that is kind of not the case for Minnesota, and especially not the case with Chase Gaspard and Hassani Dotson, where, both of these guys, they got a lot of minutes, and especially Chase Gaspard, that he really won that job in the fullback position, and that I can definitely see that he could definitely be one of the best fullbacks in the league. And don't be surprised if the U.S. men's national team might be calling him again in terms of making more appearance besides the January camp that he's already got. And Hassani Dotson, we know what he can do in terms of not only be a boss in that midfield, but also he loves to score some of the most out of the world goals that we ever seen. And it's no wonder a lot of Loons fans said that Hassani Dotson is a guy that, not only he scored goals, but he also scored bangers only. And some of the bangers that he scored last season, including the one against Sporting KC that he scored, which was the game winner, and also the one that clinched us the playoff spot, that was just absolutely amazing. And we shall see whether or not if he can continue that heading into this season. But both of these guys, I think last season a lot of people was very surprised of how good they were, and I expect that to be the same thing heading into this season, and I really think they are really the surprise package of this team. Now, what do I like about this team? They look more well-rounded than last season. So last season, they were kind of well-rounded in their team. I mean, they finally able to solve the defensive issue, but there were times, especially late in the season, where it was the offense that was struggling with this team, and that they had a run of games where they were only able to score one goals in most of these games, and that was a huge problem. If you can only score 1 goals for every single game, that's not going to win you a lot of games. And I think this season, with the fact that not only they're going to get that solid defense back this season, and that now they added some more pieces in the midfield and also on the attack, they should be more well-rounded this season, and that they should definitely be not only just as good as last season, but probably even better than they were heading into this season compared to last year. Now, the big question that I do have with this team that I kind of mentioned, we need to potentially have a replacement for Darwin Quintero, and I think Reynoso most likely is going to be that player. But in case if Reynoso doesn't come to Minnesota, I guess we don't like our playmaker. I guess we can once again rely on young Gregush. That he's kind of a interesting kind of player where he played as kind of like a holding midfield, but he can also be a very creative player, and it kind of shown when you look at the assist chart, and that he basically led the team last season in terms of assists with 12, and you wouldn't see that kind of thing happen very often in this league, where a guy that you think he's kind of like a holding midfield and almost like a central defense midfield that can really drift into that role to be kind of like a number 10 and providing assists for the team. So I guess maybe young Gregush is going to be once again that guy that is going to be providing that assist. Although I will kind of compare his role to something very similar to former Union midfielder Harris Medunian, who is now with FC Cincinnati, where it's kind of similar, where you didn't think that Harris Medunian is a guy that plays like a number 10, but he also is a guy that also provides a lot of assists, and even more than what young Gregush produced last season. And that I really think that both of those players are very similar, and it's just kind of interesting that this doesn't happen very often, where you see teams using their holding midfield and using their deep line midfielder as a creative player. But that being said, there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. If you're a Loons fan, what do you think of this off-season acquisition and the players that is no longer with this club? Who do you think is going to be the goal scorer, playmaker, MVP, and surprise package? What do you like about this team, and what is one big question that you have with this team? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.